I did a lot of work in Italy in the 80s. I traveled a number of times there. And I never lived in Italy, unfortunately. But Rome was, is the epicenter in a way. And when I look back on it, being able to move through the streets with a camera to engage the flux and flow of people everywhere, and basically with a kind of wonderful enjoyment of life, at least on the surface, was a great, sweet pleasure. So I put the book together after many years because I realized how connected and unified the work was. It had never been put together in a book, though some of it had been published in different other books. And I realized as somebody was looking at it in appreciation that it was a document of Italy in the 80s. And frankly, when I was back in Italy for a conference in Milan about 2 years ago, I was rather stunned. I went to Milan and to Tuscany and to Bologna. How changed the people of Italy were. The theater of the street was sort of gone, and the colors were gone, the way people dressed, the panache and the style and the display. Everybody looked pretty much, at least in their figura, as we look, as anybody looks anywhere. Where everybody wears blue jeans, everybody has the same coat, the same scarf, the same shoes, same tennis shoes. Everything's made in China anyway, and globalization has homogenized at least the look of people. That said, there are little secrets around Italy that one still discovers. But so when I got back from that trip, I realized this book or this work has more value or more meaning now than it ever had. And I was introduced to Andrea Albertini, the publisher of Damiani, and thought I would show him a little maquette of it, and with the thought that maybe it would be appropriate for an Italian publisher. And he immediately liked it and said, let's do it. So the rest is history. Rome changed its colors. I mean, it sort of went back to over the last 20 years, it's gone back to more traditional colors. And so I think the reflection of the colors and the light changes a little bit. Though Rome in particular always has a remarkable light. But there's just the overall coloration of Italy has changed. The sky doesn't change, of course. The trees don't change. But I think the life of the street is definitely changed. I think that's a very good point. I mean, any good photographer or any good portrait photographer or portrait painter, if it isn't about you, it isn't about anything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just pictorialism and a kind of cliche of the world. Again, as Luigi says at the end of the text, I'd like to go photographing with you, but don't take me to see any Tuscan villas with big pine trees and sunflowers around them. I want to see the real Italy. And when one looks, and works as I work as an artist, it is a reflection of me as much as it's a reflection of who I've looked at, and that's what gives character and meaning to any body of work. I wasn't ever, anywhere that I've ever traveled, never been interested in the usual tourist sites, though they can be wonderful backdrops for a kind of intimate encounter. The other thing to say is that I don't travel to go, I travel to photograph. I have no idea what it is like to be a conventional tourist any time in my life. I've never gone anywhere just to be a tourist. I've always gone with the purpose of photographing, which is the ultimate pleasure and frankly the most rewarding way to travel, because you can at least pretend to get into things, to be a part of something. You're not just a distant observer. You're imposing. You're view your idea, your ideology upon what you see. I mean, it's only focused on the 80s because in the early 80s, from 1980 to about 83, I must have gone to Italy 10 times for 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. I traveled, maybe not 10 times, but a good number of times, I guess 6 to 8. And I went to Italy because it was so colorful, because life, the Italian ethos, caught my imagination, and because all of it was displayed, if you will, its layering and its interaction on the street and on and life is played out in the street in Italy. I mean, people flock to the street. I don't know if they still do, but to do the promenade, in the evening at the lunch break. It's a place of socialization, and it is in other places too. But in Italy, it's particularly wonderful and particularly lively. And I was traveling and had the the interest of going to Italy just to photograph, which I did. And I didn't have much chance. Later on in the late 80s, early 90s, even to travel that way as I did earlier. I mean, I traveled all over the world photographing, but sometimes for assignments and sometimes for other things, other photographic projects. I was there in last fall, and I was there 2 years ago. I think that's true. I think, and I wrote this just the other day, I think in the 80s, Italy, first of all, travel for young adults was easier than it had been at another age, and so we all, Americans in particular, got more interested in being in other places and traveling. But I think in Italy you have a unique phenomena of a country, or rather a place, that had generated two remarkable cultures. The Roman culture, which penetrates throughout all of Western civilization. And then again, 1,000 years later almost, the Renaissance. And those two cultures are overlapped and overlaid throughout Italy. And then a subsequent culture of evolution through, let's say, through the modern times. I think after the war, World War II, I mean, Italy must have been very depressed immediately after. I was too young to know that, but I've seen documentaries and I know the history and I've read it. And its political upheaval. But Italy kind of reimagined itself. And it became a great destination for anybody interested in culture and in food and in life. And I think in the 80s, which was a relatively prosperous time throughout the world, post-Vietnam, post all of those things, there was probably an optimism in Italy, probably a potentiality that our culture, our products, our clothing, our food, our small businesses of Italian crafts were moving throughout the world as a kind of symbol of elegance and luxury. So I think there was an optimism that you don't find in Italy today, when after the recent economic crisis, but also as the things that Italy produced to get produced everywhere are mimicked and so on and so forth. And I think in a way the pessimism you're talking about is not particularly unique to Italy. I mean, you can feel it among the middle class and among particularly the poor in this country, where we've lost, everybody's losing their identity, losing their individuality, their idiosyncratic things to a bigger corporate giant, a bigger political giant, and also to the machinations of Wall Street. I use Wall Street generically because it's everywhere. I think you feel that in Italy, and I think maybe that optimism. I know that the unemployment is huge. Young people are really particularly creative young people, are really beside themselves in Italy. That's true in a lot of places in the world. I think if you go anywhere, you have to take your own personal, political, social, ethical, moral value system with you. And what you photograph and how you photograph has to be a reflection of that, along with your own delight and joy in photographing. Now that sounds simplistic, but it's the essence. If you're going there with a preconceived notion, then you're probably on an assignment or you're doing illustration. So you have to go there with an eye to discover and to see, if you will, the realities of what you find, and then interpret them through your own vehicles of imagination. I think if one were to look at Italy, one would really want to look at the great influx of globalization upon it today, upon the migrations and different ethnicities that have come into Italy, and how they affect and change, and how they have created their own culture within Italy. I mean, in the 80s, Italy was still pretty homogeneous, still pretty much an Italian heritage. But now you go to Italy, you see people from everywhere in the world. Large communities of Asians and Middle Europeans and so on and so forth. And that has a big effect, I think.